We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, Culture Starts Here.
This content series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at ADVISA, a Midwest-based consultancy helping CEOs, HR leaders, and managers transform workplace culture.
In each episode, ADVISA CEO Heather Haas and leadership consultant BJ McKay dive into practical ways to initiate and sustain the culture you need to drive growth and success at your organization.
The Culture Starts Here series starts now.
Hey, welcome to Culture Starts Here series on the CultureCon podcast. I'm BJ McKay, leadership consultant with ADVISA, and I'm here with our ADVISA CEO, Heather Haas. So speaking of CultureCon, today we are at CultureCon.
We are, indeed.
We drove up yesterday 5 hours and some change because of my no tolls selection on Waze, which I apologize for.
Yeah, took
But we
us
righted that.
a little bit out of the way.
All right. So I think what everyone really wants to know is like, what was the highlight from your journey as like leader development and culture is a journey? How about your journey from Indianapolis to Madison?
Well, it was fun. You know, we're in the car with people we work with. 5 hours was a long period of time. I think the highlight was probably realizing how fast you drive, looking over and seeing 96 on the speedometer and having to say, you know, maybe we need to just bring it down a little bit. But no, it was fun. We were pulling up like conversation prompts and we were sharing and laughing and it was good bonding. It was great.
I love it. I love when we were doing the question game too. All the meanwhile, it's just they're trying to distract you from how fast I was driving.
Yes,
we lost. We came in third.
Yeah, we did. There were in fact we took 3 cars. We're based in Indianapolis, so 3 cars up here to Madison, and yeah, I think we were third out of 3.
It's like that song they say, it's not a competition, but they won.
Right.
And that's
right.
They rubbed it in our face.
They did.
So now that we're here, we've already been through we haven't hit day 2 yet, so we have more to take in. And your panel is tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow. So I won't ask you about your panel that you weren't on yet.
Correct.
So we'll move from there for another episode. So what I found so far in the sessions that I've been in, it's been really validating to hear how all the speakers and topics and things flow around the Atlas framework that we had presented throughout our podcast series. So for those who haven't seen our previous episodes, are going to follow this track with us right now. I'd love to hear, Heather, just a quick recap for everybody, like what Atlas is, and if you found any meaningful connections along the way that you can fit into that, then we'll kind of build on that as we have a conversation today.
Yeah, I mean, overall, today was very validating. I think when we put out our point of view about the 5 drivers that create cultural competitive advantage, that was born out of, you know, almost 40 years of doing this work, working with leaders across all industries, helping them, you know, try to create work environments where the best and brightest people want to be, learning from what works, what doesn't work. So, you know, as a refresher, those 5 drivers: activation from above, the executive team being involved and prioritizing culture starts at the top. Trust and shared purpose, mission, vision, values, people aligning around those things, understanding where the organization is headed and why, and then being able to link culture to that. Leader effectiveness, the importance that leaders play as culture carriers, the ones who, through their behaviors, what they celebrate, what they tolerate, are actually creating the culture. Actionable people data, you know, leaders need information about the employee experience, about how their teams are motivated in order to make course corrections and build connection with people at an individual level. And then systems, you know, the policies, procedures, software, all of the norms that leaders and managers are operating within that are either going to enable and be aligned with the values and the intentional culture that the company is trying to create, or sometimes our systems are actually at odds. So all 5 of those drivers were alive and well today. I mean, I heard speakers talking about, you know, the way a CEO in particular, an HR professional, had partnered with her CEO to really architect what is the culture that we need here and why, and the way that that executive team absolutely prioritize, you know, for example, paying for individual coaching for every single person in the company.
That was huge.
That's amazing. Right? I mean, that's an example of, you know, when you talk about activation from above, you know, the CEO's willingness to invest time, attention, and budget. There you go. that's also an example of systems, where coaching and the regular cadence of people getting to talk to someone outside their organization to focus on their own development, that becomes a norm. That becomes a system that is then very aligned with creating a high engagement work environment. So those are just a couple examples.
And riff off of that too, when we linger on that coaching piece for a second, I was talking with some other consultants as well. And one thing we also talked about is the emotional, that therapeutic coaching, counseling load that a lot of leaders and managers have to carry.
Yeah.
The fact that they have that outside coach there, I'm like, how much lower did that bar? Is it not still important? Yes. But that load that manager has to carry on that now, knowing I have my coach and my company's invested in me, how much of a difference that must make.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, it wasn't long ago, maybe a year ago, the Surgeon General came out and declared an epidemic of loneliness. So there are lonely people walking in the doors of our organizations, popping on to the Zoom meetings. And so for a company to create that system of connection, either through an outside coach or just emphasizing the importance for managers to build relationships with their employees. I totally agree. It gives employees more points of connection, which can really help them click in and feel seen and valued and included in what's going on.
Yeah, and there's been so many good takeaways. Thanks for the Atlas refresher for the crew. And right now, what you're going to experience in a second, if you're listening to this, you didn't get to make it to CultureCon maybe. You didn't get to hear it, but you're thinking, oh, here's all the decks, here's all the slide, which is great. What Heather and I want to do is draw through our experience. Mm-hmm. Hers as a CEO watching this, mine as a leadership consultant going through this. And we pulled through nuggets on these days that we want to bring up, present to you, break them down a little bit in terms of how we see those. Like when you're trying to get started on my culture, what can I take from this and do? Well, we're going to riff about those, and we're going to leave you at the end with some of those practical takeaways. Mm-hmm. We'll try to dial it in if you're listening to this into things that you can do, take to your teams, take to your leadership team, take to your crew to try to start enacting or bring up and have maybe a challenging conversation about, hey, how might we do these things different?
For sure.
So you have a ton, but I want to start because I want to riff off of our last episode. We started with activation from above, and mm-hmm. Heather, you did a great job kind of sharing, and I tackled it from a few different angles. The session I just walked out of, the woman that walked up, it's a company called Phil, and she's had all these 10x growth. Her track record of companies like fast growth. It was like super impressive. It's like 7 minutes. And I'm like, whatever you're going to say, I'm listening. Like it was huge. The first thing that she said was the first thing I do, and she's talking about when she goes to a new company, is align with the executive team and the CEO on what engagement is.
Wow.
So comes in, tunes up like, hey, are you going to make this important or not? And I thought like, man, what are some practical activation from above moments? And I'm like, that's it right there. Not the CEO, not the founder, not the owner, but coming in. If you want me to do what you said you want me to do, I need us to be on the same page as to what this was. So I thought that was super strong.
I think it's incredibly important. It also speaks to the value of someone in HR, chief people officer, CHRO, whatever that role is, being in sync with the CEO, with the executive team, because often most of the problems that occur or the conflicts and the struggles related to building culture, investing in culture, they come down to we weren't on the same page from the jump. You've got an HR professional off in this direction trying to do these really noble, wonderful things, be it invest in leadership development or, put their hat in the ring for best places to work or whatever the case may be. And then you've got an executive team who doesn't approve the budget. It may be, in fact, because they never sat in the room and had that conversation.
Yeah, and otherwise, you're in the seat of taking what you get.
Right.
And now it's a reactive mode, and it's a tough spot for folks to get into.
Yeah.
So as we riff more on these, Heather's going to look at her phone some. I'm going to look at this page in front of us right now because we took notes. Like you're getting real time.
Yeah.
And Heather brilliantly pulled all of our other team members that are here in all these different sessions. So we're going to bring up a panoply of those. So I don't know if you have one queued up right now that was meaningful to you, Heather. Love to hear it.
Yeah. We actually have 14 people from our company here that we brought up here to beautiful Madison, Wisconsin, I should say. The land of cheese curds and all kinds of good things. And Wisconsin Badgers that we experienced last night. This one is wonderful. This is just a quote that a team member of ours shared. Cultures that listen are cultures that evolve. And I loved that because we spend a lot of time helping our clients be intentional and do the things to change and shape culture. But one of the best things that this speaker brought forward was that is super important. You've got to set it in motion, but then the maintaining culture, the keeping it alive and well is really a function of listening. And what are the mechanisms? How are we? She mentioned having listening sessions, and there was a whole array, of ways that organizations can listen to employees. But I just thought that was great because the reality is the world is always changing. And when the world is always changing, the way we experience life and work is shifting and changing too. So I think that's an important reminder for those of us that care about work culture. We've got to always continue to keep our ear to the ground so that we can make pivots.
I want to hear your perspective on that. If I break that down one step further, is what do you think are some of the key factors that get in the way of like listening? Because we hear a lot in clients that we work with. We need to listen. We're listening to our people, and then we get data back that doesn't seem like they're getting feedback that's like you're not doing it, but you have leaders that seem to have the intention. They're trying. So I'd love to hear your perspective on what might be getting in the way of that becoming like actual in the organizations.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to your question, BJ, is we're busy, but that's a cop-out. We can prioritize and we make time for the things that are important. I think sometimes what can get in the way of that kind of listening, where employees maybe need to vent or people want to share what's not working, or they want to, make the executive team aware of how the company needs to do more. I think sometimes what CEOs think is, I don't agree. They don't see what goes on behind the scenes. And I think what we forget is that listening doesn't mean you agree.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy is not agreement. And so where we can just help leaders at all levels understand that to just create the space so that employees can share what's on their hearts and minds, that alone is extremely valuable. And it sends a strong message to the employee that is, I care. We may not agree, and we may not be able to prioritize everything that you're suggesting, but I made time to hear you out. Mm-hmm. And I think that alone can be very powerful.
Awesome. So we hit listening. That jumped out. What else came through our feed on our group chat?
Okay, here's the next one. This speaker was talking about, the importance of learning and development, and I happen to passionately agree with this as an educator myself and leading an organization that creates and delivers learning experiences for leaders. What she said was that, learning is a container for change and for creating alignment, but she was sharing that learning and development needs to be baked in to everything that happens in the organization. That the values and the cultural imperatives need to be baked in to how we do what we do, what the people are learning, not just sprinkled on. And that difference between baked in, programmatically embedded, versus we just sort of tack it on, make reference to these values, and then we just go over here and talk about giving feedback or talk about managing change. And it's completely disconnected from the values that we reference. So I loved the way she said that, because really baking in strategic imperatives and core values into learning experiences is a lot more art than science. It takes a lot of instructional design expertise. It takes time spent with leaders and HR professionals to make sure that we're hitting the right notes and that we're linking their values in meaningful, relevant ways to whatever skills they've prioritized need to be part of what good leadership looks like at their organization.
Yeah, I love that. I was next to you in that session too. And what I loved was from the moment you're getting interviewed, those values are alive.
Yes.
They're alive, and like we role play, and how do we bring these to the interview, and how do we bring them here? They're the priority. They're the starting point for all of these pieces all throughout the organization.
Yeah, and related to that hiring, she was talking about, they really made a shift away from, it used to be hiring for technical skills was so important. Does this person have the right pedigree? Did they go to the right schools? Have they done the right work history and all that? Not that that's not important, but that today what they focus on is the more human side, the more relational, human pieces of the puzzle, not just the technical side, and incorporating the values into an interview. And I think she also mentioned something like a values rubric that they use to even evaluate current employees. How well are they personifying and living out the core values? Wow, talk about activating and making sure that your values don't just hang on the wall or live on the website, but they're making it into the fabric of the organization. I thought that was great. And then role playing, of course, this was a new idea for me, but she was saying how in interviews, they set up a role play. So they'll set up a scenario that somehow ties in with one of their values. And then it's sort of like lights, camera, action, go. And that candidate has to just start role playing with whoever the interviewers are. But she was sharing how that's a really raw and accurate way to see some of these things come through.
Yeah, and she talked, I have it in my notes right here, the shift from that like rote to contextual leadership, she called it, Heather.
Well, yeah, it was basic to contextual, and then it was adaptive.
Adaptive performance. And like the tenets were creativity, connectivity, and agility.
Yeah, what she was talking about is that the future of work is going to be more about those durable skills, because as AI continues to take more of the transactional work off of all of our plates, what remains will be that which is uniquely human, that which AI or technology can't do for us. And so I loved her emphasis on, so let's define what are those durable human skills that we need and want all of our employees to have.
I love it. And she framed AI as an amplifier.
Yes.
Which I thought was a really creative, poignant way to pull that through versus some kind of threat or replacement. I thought that was making that clear and removing the cloud of doubt. Is AI going to take my job? Am I going to have that here? I mean, they put a stake in the ground, which I thought was great.
I read something recently, to that point, AI isn't coming for your job, but someone who uses AI well is, so it's here. But how do we blend that with the human and all of us become better in the process?
What came up next?
What's next? Culture is a force multiplier, buoyed not just by what leaders say, but how people feel. Several speakers mentioned that culture is a feeling, and I don't disagree. But for those of you listening who are tuning in because you want to do culture work or you're invested in making change, it's hard to when you say culture is a feeling, that's kind of hard to get your arms around. So she went on to say, though, that culture work demands a spine. Great metaphor. As a former English teacher, anytime you can work a metaphor in, because of course your spine gives you strength. It holds you upright. It supports your frame. Love that metaphor. But culture demands a spine, a strategy, and a plan. And those three things, I completely agree with her. And that's what in our work that's why it was affirming. We're similarly doing that. We're trying to create a process that we take executive teams through to define the values that will be the spine, if you will, of your intentional culture. Define the leader capabilities. What do leaders need to say and do to activate those values? But then the plan starts to come into shape when we design customized learning experiences that we put leaders through over sometimes multiple years so that they can learn and they have the space to build those new skills, gain the self-awareness, and learn how to carry the culture in those ways. But the communication about, here's the game plan. In year one, this is what we're doing to define and clarify our culture. Year two, here's how we're going to activate that through leadership development, through a host of other ways. Namely, she talked about weaving it into performance management is another way that you can really bring some accountability to the behaviors that represent your culture. But then also just laying out, this is a long play. Research would say it takes 3 to 5 years to change a culture. So that plan, that year one, year two, year three kind of look at how this all unfolds, I thought was just so important for us to remember. There's no quick fix for culture.
Well, it reminds me of a story. I wasn't in this meeting. I was coaching somebody to have a conversation with the CFO of an organization. mid-sized organization, let's say that's somewhere between like upper thousands to 1,500 employees. And there was the lone person who didn't want to red light this work or the work. And when I was talking to them, I was sharing with them and I'm like, all right, so you're done now. Now you have to ask him for his plan. Because they're dealing with an issue that was just continuous and it was just the same after the same, but it wasn't changing.
Right.
She had data that was showing, you have hard data that's showing something. Have you asked him what his plan is? And there's that moment where she froze, she's like, I haven't. And I'm like, here's your moment.
Yeah,
like there's
absolutely.
no more presentations. There's no more like cajoling. And then she did it. I'm like, well, how did it go? I asked him, it's like, okay. We will remove names to protect the innocent or the guilty. And I'm like, okay, so if we don't do this, assume it's, what are we going to do? And it was silence, fumbling, and then it got green lighted.
There you
So
go.
like it was at some point you get to that place where it's like, okay, great. So what are you going to do?
Right. If not this, then what?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Well, another theme as I'm pulling themes around, like what am I hearing that might be different as we talk about culture? Like in the vernacular that we use, this is like, in a certain sense, it's kind of new work. What we're labeling and organizations are calling out culture. It's coming up. Something that's come out in multiple sessions now has been mindset.
Yes.
And I'm hearing more mindset coaching and how much mindset is important. In the example you gave earlier, the woman from Butcher Box was talking about how that's like a key critical thing that gets interviewed on in mindset. So I don't know if you have any take on that as you look at that, or if you're figuring out, if someone's listening to this, like, no, like, what is mindset? How do I interview for that? How do we build that? How do we curate that within the culture we're trying to build?
Well, it was funny. I was having a conversation with someone else on our team about this idea of mindset, and he brought up the reality because we do this work. We're bringing leaders, cohorts of leaders into our office every week, taking them through learning journeys. And he was sharing that, if someone doesn't have a growth mindset, if someone is showing up to those programs, so good news, the executive team has blessed it, they're investing in it, we're doing it, but the individuals who show up don't have a mindset that is, okay, I'm open to doing things in a new way or learning new skills, it doesn't go anywhere from there. So I do think the notion of mindset is that it precedes behavior. Mindset dictates what behaviors are going to flow from there. If we're closed off and we don't have a mindset of curiosity, for example, or a mindset for development and growth, then all the tactics or strategies that are aimed at helping people grow and develop are not going to happen because that mindset is closed. And there's all the brain science and all of that, which I'm not an expert in, but I'm certainly fascinated by all of that. I do think mindset matters.
100%. And I just left a session where it was the whole theme, and they were connecting it back to resilience, the importance of resilience and how you can build resilience. And it kept coming back to like your willingness to take that, like what's your mindset in this situation? There's one that leads down the road to despair.
Yeah.
That like, this is going to go wrong. We know those people, Heather. And then there's the other ones like, all right, where's the opportunity here? What's going on? And the fact that if we go back to another talk, that like they are prioritizing that is the specialness that they want. Like they didn't have the experience and they were young and they were then, and we pushed against the board and we hired them because of that mindset. So if you're listening to this and you're further down the food chain and you're like, what are the things I could do to get ahead? You might take some time to think about what is your mindset in those meetings. And when you're looking at other people around you that are in the complain train, I don't know if I just made that up or not. We could trademark that later.
I like it.
The complain train. And you got to ask yourself, is taking a different tact on this maybe my move? Well, if it leads toward a growth mindset where you're going to bring a general lift, like, is it worth a shot to bring that in there?
Well, and tying into that, one of the things I love about Nick and Zach and the way they've put together CultureCon and the mission is they talk about how no matter what your role in an organization, whether you're the CFO or you're a mid-level manager or you're someone on the front lines, everyone has the opportunity to influence the culture of the organization. Everyone has control of their attitude, the behaviors they bring to work, and that ripple effect of no matter who you are or what level you are you do have the ability to influence what it feels like to work at your organization. That's really uplifting, I think, for people who are listening, especially young people who are at the beginning stages of their career. Be the person who shows up curious, who desires to make an impact, who doesn't point fingers, but instead asks, what can I do or change in this situation instead of waiting for someone else to be the one.
And carrying that mindset before we shift into the next one, if you want to cue it up here,
Okay.
is that there's a certain level of resilience just because you're demonstrating, let's call it a growth mindset, doesn't mean you're not still feeling that levels of resentment and I didn't deserve this. And this is really not working through that is the growth mindset. It isn't like, I'm just not like that.
Right.
I'm just
right.
negative. Like we work a lot with assessments and like how people are wired. And for some, it's much easier. You're just kind of gifted it than others. But for other people, it's working through the same things to choose the behavior. And sometimes the behavior that is a growth mindset will feel icky.
Yeah.
It'll feel like, this is unjust. What's happening to me? And you do it anyway. And I'm like, all right, let's just measure that. Like, all right, let's see what happens from that behavior. And you go from there. So
What if?
What do you have next, Heather?
Okay, so a little bit of some data here. Workplaces will be 74% millennial and Gen Z by 2030. They're the most diverse, most educated, and they want purpose, not just money and benefits. We've known that, but realizing, how that tipping point is coming. They are also much less tolerant of disrespect and command and control style of leadership. And of course, all of this calls for the importance of building emotional intelligence capability within our organizations, which of course is embedded in all of our development work that we do. But there's no doubt that, even last night when we were at dinner and we were just kind of joking about, we were observing the people working in the restaurants and establishments that were a different generation than we are. And there are differences, but those differences are not bad. It's just different. So how do we acknowledge that, we've got the age and the complexion of the workforce is changing. And if the leaders in the workforce don't change too, we're not going to reach our potential and we're not going to achieve our goals as fast or as profitably as we could.
I was on a call yesterday, Heather, on that note, with a gentleman who works in leadership and development for a global organization that everyone would know.
Okay.
And they have plants all over the world. And in these plants, they work in metals and glass. Mm-hmm. The apprenticeship they would go in, it would typically be 5 years. They're union shops before you would get your bid. 5 years, and you would get your bid to work. Now, based on turnover is so high at the front level, it's months.
Oh, wow.
They're getting a bid because and that the reason we're having this conversation is we can't keep but the old guard, guess how they feel about that?
Yeah.
When I paid it took me 10 years.
I paid my dues, and these young kids coming in, they get to,
And there's truth to it. I understand how they feel because there's experiences, there's knowledge in there's all these things that you had to earn to do, but like business realities right now are not allowing for that at these plants. And they even shared that one of their highest producing plants had to be closed.
Wow.
Due to replacement costs. You're winning. You're hitting your metrics. We're shut down because of the issue that you're talking about.
Yeah,
right there.
no, turnover is expensive. So any little insider edge, whether it's generational differences in dynamics, understanding behavioral science and how we're all wired differently, brain, understanding brain science and all of that, it's all coming into the workplace because we're looking for any edge and advantage we can get. It's hard work.
If you're a manager listening to this, you're probably getting exhausted. What else do I have to pay attention?
Well, that's a good segue here because the next one I have here is about resilience.
Here we go.
Yeah. Resilience is, and I love this one. Resilience is how you recharge, not how you endure. And that's really profound. A brain-friendly break requires you to let something out of your body and limit the information in. And, as you think about the world that we live in, where we're constantly bombarded with inputs and information, and we're always getting the stimulation from our phones and social media and everything, just that permission to not let everything in and to, recharge, not endure. I don't know, it's just kind of a different twist on wellness. We've been hearing a lot about wellness,
Right.
super important. I've just never heard it framed around resilience that way.
How do you think someone could, if I'm nodding my head at this, which obviously I would, sitting next to you here, how might I help my team prioritize that? Particularly in organizations where we're about excellence here, we're about quality, we're about getting it done, we're about a fit, like all the language that, of course, you need to hit your business results. And it feels like it's the opposite,
Yeah.
even though it's completely true, backed by science. Like, this is how we operate as people. What are some ideas you might have for someone that would like to bring that to the forefront? We want to make that a priority.
Well, I mean, we've chatted about this before, BJ, on this podcast, but it comes back to, what's the business case? If we're experiencing turnover, we just talked about how costly that is. If we're struggling to attract top talent and great people are moving on to our competitors, we've got to make the work environment magnetic. We've got to come up with ways that people can show up and feel cared for, they can grow, and they can have moments and they can have permission to do that recharging. So, yeah, I mean, probably a topic for another time, how do you weave in the wellness and all of those ideas? But, just very practically, a leader who simply gets in front of the company and very authentically says, I'm burned out. And I want to stand before all of you and let you know that I'm aware probably some of you are burned out. And we're going to start to do some small things that hopefully, when compounded together, can make a big difference. Just that talking about it and even making small baby steps, I think, can go a long way with employees who are craving it.
Thanks, Heather. So we have time for probably one more before we land the plane. What's that?
Okay.
What's on the highlight reel?
Well, good. I think we're going to end on maybe one of my favorites here. Culture lives in our conversations. That it's kind of the in-between of our day-to-day and the micro moments. I love that because what we talk about is a manifestation of what we're thinking about. What we talk about is a manifestation of what we're feeling, what we're afraid of, what we're hopeful for. So I think what we say and do with each other every day is what becomes our culture. So the extent to which you want to change that or shift that, you do really have to start with, okay, if what we're saying and doing right now isn't getting us where we want to go, what needs to be different? What's the from to? And really defining that in, like we said earlier, the mindsets and the behaviors is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, and when you see it in clients, when you hear people unprovoked using the language of your culture, using your values, using competencies and things, like seeing those signs show up, has to be so validating when you're starting this work. You're like, we didn't tell them they needed to do that. Like, They just started doing it. And I'm like, that didn't happen because you sent out a memo on Friday. You lived it out and you enforced it. So
yeah, and that's how people come to trust, back to that trust and shared purpose. When we say it and then we do it and we keep doing it and we keep doing it, people start to say, this is real. I can trust this organization. I can trust my manager. They have my best interests at heart.
All right. I know we kind of covered a lot of ground, but it wouldn't be one of our podcasts here if we didn't talk and give somebody a place to start. So Heather, what's a place we can help folks start as it relates to the culture work like we touched on today?
For sure. Our website, ADVISA, ADVISA.com, is a great place to start. We have a button on there that says Culture Check. You hit that button, you're going to access a 5-minute survey. The questions all map back to the 5 drivers we talked about earlier for creating cultural competitive advantage. And we find that's a really helpful way to take a complex topic like culture and change and make it a bit more manageable by zeroing in on where do we have some strengths and where do we have opportunity for improvement. It's also a great way when you get those results back immediately after you take the culture check. You can use that to elevate the conversation about culture in your organization. So you can use that then as a discussion document, a way to generate dialogue with other people in the organization.
Yeah, and it's not a book that you're reading externally. It's data on your organization.
Correct.
So ADVISA.com, Culture Gut Check, 5 minutes. You get the report right away. Go ahead and do it. So for this episode, I'm BJ McKay.
And I'm Heather Haas.
And culture
starts here.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,